Okay, so just as a quick recap, the chapter is 13, titled Excretion, and the definition of excretion as given in the textbook is the removal of toxic materials and the waste products of metabolism from organisms. Right, so we talked about what metabolism is. It is the sum of all reactions or processes in the body, which includes building up materials and breaking them down. Right, and then we talked about, well, we did digress a bit about how the term is used in the text, but let's leave that. So excretory materials include waste products of chemical reactions. Take pointer. The waste products of chemical reactions, excess water and ions in diet, and also hormones. So the chemical reactions that take place in the body can give rise to products that are toxic or poisonous to the body, and so they need to be removed. An example is carbon dioxide, which is produced as a result of the aerobic respiration and breakdown of glucose. Then you've got urea, which is produced from the processing of excess amino acids in the liver. So, unlike uh, glucose or fats, like sugars and fats that can be stored in the body if they're in excess, amino acids cannot be stored. And so, what happens in the liver is that the amino group from the amino acids is removed, and that makes ammonia, right, which is very toxic. And that removal of the amino group is called deamination. So, the ammonia is converted to urea, which is less toxic, and then it is moved to the kidneys where it is filtered out into urine and then passed out of the body. The rest of the molecule of the amino acid now is converted to sugars and then stored. Right? And so the organs that are involved in excretory processes in the body are the lungs, the liver, the kidney. Right? We've talked about the lungs in detail when we're talking about breathing, gas exchange. We just mentioned the role of the liver. And so what we're going to do is focus on the role of the kidney. I say focus, it's not very detailed, but we have some material to cover. So first of all, the physical location of the kidney and their appearance, I guess. So they are rather firm, right? Quite solid. So they've got firm tissue and they're oval and red brown. And they are surrounded by a transparent membrane. Have you seen kidneys in real life? Like any kidneys?
I haven't, but like I have saw the heart of like a chicken,
Of a chicken?
like, of a hen.
Of a
Hen.
hen?
Yeah.
Ah, you haven't seen the heart of like a goat or a cow or something?
I have seen that. I have saw the like heart of a goat as well, but
Ah,
not the cow.
you haven't seen their kidneys?
No.
Interesting. Have you seen the lungs?
Yeah.
Ah,
Of a fish.
of a fish. Fish don't have lungs.
Mhm. Of not fish like frog. Sorry.
Frog.
Yeah.
Okay. So just so you know, there are some fish that actually have lungs. One of them is, because it has lungs, it's called the lungfish, just because it has lungs. But in general, fish don't have lungs. So yeah. So they are surrounded by a transparent membrane and they're attached to the back of the abdominal cavity.
So like those fish don't have gills then.
I'm not familiar with those specifics, something I need to look up, but after class, I guess.
Okay.
Right, so they're attached to the back. So the kidney is actually towards the back of the body, right? Not towards the front and to the sides. And so, right from the aorta, aorta, right? It branches off to form the renal artery, right? And that goes to each kidney. You know, there are two of them, right? And similarly, the renal veins, right, coming from the kidneys, they come together to join with the vena cava, which is the vein that takes blood to the heart. So that's the blood supply, right? And as you know, aorta is bringing in the renal arteries are bringing in oxygenated blood, and the renal veins are taking away deoxygenated blood. And from each kidney, there is a tube called the ureter. So each kidney has one of these, right? And this carries the urine and takes it to the bladder. So you only have one bladder, right? So assuming this is the bladder, you've got the ureter coming in from each kidney, right? Not the best illustration. And then right from the bladder, the urine is excreted out of the body or removed, right, from the body. Via the urethra. So that's a passage from which the urine is removed from the body, the urethra. Also, right, the bladder has a ring of muscles.
Like there are different letters,
Different
like
what?
veins.
They're different?
Like ureters, like there are different veins.
No, there's just like one ureter coming from each kidney. In fact, I drew that very right. I just noticed if I'm slightly more particular about that, right? Assuming that's a kidney, and so the ureter is coming from here.
And what's a bladder?
Bladder is a muscular bag
And
where urine is stored.
okay. Like below our stomach.
Yes, right
Okay.
in the lower abdominal region. And right, the mouth of the bladder over here has this ring of muscles called the sphincter, right? And this helps control the passage of urine, right? So in adults, right, they can control when to relax the sphincter. So when the sphincter relaxes, right, and urine can pass. and adults can control when to do that. So if it's not appropriate, right, they don't let it relax, they keep it contracted, and so they can, hold it for when it's appropriate, when it's possible. Children, the book says up to 3 years, I believe, right? That's when they develop control. Otherwise, they don't have much control according to the book over their sphincter, and so that has its own problems, obviously, with toddlers and kids. Okay, now taking a look at the kidney in a bit more detail. All right, the microscopic structure of kidneys. Oh, by the way, the ammonia is very toxic and it's also alkaline. So it affects, if it's there in your body, it will affect the pH of your blood.
But like, I mean, ammonia is like in the clouds, so doesn't it affect our environment as well?
Ammonia is in the clouds?
Yeah. Ammonia again.
No. I mean, if you've got ammonia gas in the clouds, you have problems. Clouds are basically water vapor.
Like, the one which are made like chemically, they have ammonia gas.
If there is ammonia gas in the environment, then yes, obviously that is bad for you because it is toxic and it has effects, right? Normally you wouldn't have that. But I don't recall, you know, coming across ammonia gas as a pollutant. Is ammonia gas an environmental pollutant? हाँ. Right, so I just looked it up and turns out ammonia is quite the pollutant. So, right. So yes, obviously if you've got ammonia in the air, and so that is going to have effects. Okay. Now taking a look at the microscopic structure of the kidney. Right, so the kidney contains many capillaries, right, and tiny tubes that are called renal tubules. So you've got, right, a dense network of capillaries, and then you've got a, right, many tiny capillaries called renal tubules.
And like where our kidney is located.
Hmm?
And like where our kidney is located.
Sorry, I can't make that out. Could you repeat that?
And like where kidneys are located.
Where the kidney is located?
Yeah.
We just talked about that, right? So they are located at the back of the abdominal cavity.
What's the
So
abdominal?
yeah. So if I just show you the illustration from the book, of where they are located exactly. Has the screen changed? No?
Mm.
Where is it? Okay. So those are the kidneys, right, on either side. And if you want a more anatomical image, let me pull something up so I can share that with you. Right. So here's something. Let me just put it on screen. Can I zoom into this? Good. So, right, you've got the brain up there, you've got the lungs, the heart between the lungs, the liver underneath the lungs, you've got the diaphragm in between, they aren't showing that. Right, so that muscular layer that's separating the chest from the abdomen. Then you've got the stomach, and over here you've got the kidneys, right? Squeezed in between, you've got the gallbladder and pancreas, and then over here the intestines, right? So that's the location of the kidneys, and then towards the back. So then, like they've made it to the front so that you can see it clearly, but they're actually towards the back.
Like
Hmm?
they are like with the spinal cord or like apart from the spinal cord.
I'm sorry. Are they apart from what?
The spinal cord
Oh no, no, they're the spinal cord is like they're not attached to the
and then
spine. Yeah, yeah. So so they're not attached to the spinal cord.
okay.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Going back to the whiteboard. So the dense network of capillaries that's coming in from the renal artery, right? That's coming in from the renal artery. And right, the renal artery divides into smaller arteries called arterioles and then into capillaries. Right now, the three regions of the uh, kidney. It has an outer region called the cortex, which is like an outer darker region, which is the one we get to see, and this is called the cortex. Then you got an inner light region, which is called the medulla. And then you've got, the space, the area where the ureter joins into the kidney. That's called the pelvis. Right, so these are the three regions of the kidney. So as for the blood supply, right, what happens is each arteriole, right, so that's a smaller artery, forms a sort of, you know, condensed network, condensed mass of capillaries, let's say, and that is termed the glomerulus, right? And this is in the cortex. I'll show you an illustration of this once I'm done explaining it. And the glomerulus is surrounded by a cup-shaped structure.
There's a cortex in our body as well.
In our body as well. So what's the other cortex that you are referring to?
Plant.
Hmm?
Plant.
Well, that's because they're using cortex in terms of what it means, right? So it's not similar to the cortex that is in the plants, right?
Okay.
So let's take a look at what the cortex, saying cortex means. So right, so the cortex refers to the outermost layer, and so in case of, right, uh, the plants, that's the cortex over there. The brain has a cerebral cortex, the plant has a cortex, right, which is between the epidermis and the vascular bundle. You've got the renal cortex, you've got the adrenal cortex, which are with the adrenal glands, right? So cortex basically means outermost layer or covering. Okay. And so when we say so when we say cortex, we have to be specific. Are we talking about the root cortex, which you were referring to, or the renal cortex, which, right, renal means kidney? So the renal cortex, or are we talking about the brain? Obviously, we're not studying that, but right, the cerebral cortex. So that means we're talking about the brain, right? And so we need to be specific. What cortex is it that we're talking about? Okay. Right. So the glomerulus is surrounded by a cup-shaped structure called the Bowman's capsule. Hmm? Now, from the Bowman's capsule, right, it's not just a cup-shaped structure. So it's sort of like you have this mass of capillaries over here, and then you have this cup-shaped structure, right? And this leads to a tubule, right? And it goes like this, and then comes back, and then goes like that again.
It looks like an intestine.
Hmm?
Intestine. It looks like an intestine.
Okay. And then it finally goes and forms the collecting duct. Right? So these are the right? This guy and this guy, there's more specific detail about that, but that's beyond your O level syllabus. You'll study about that in A level. So these are the renal tubules that they're talking about. This is the glomerulus. This is the Bowman's capsule. You're scribbling over here. And this guy over here, we're not talking about this part. Okay, just let's just take this whole thing as the renal tubule, right? And then this over here is the collecting duct, right? Which goes to all the way to the pelvis to, to the ureter. Okay.
And like where's pelvis?
Hmm?
Like where is pelvis?
The pelvis is the innermost part, or technically the part of the kidney where the ureter is joining, right? And also where the renal artery and the renal vein are. So
So like it's the in the middle. It's in the between.
I mean, beginning and end doesn't really fit over here. I'll show you the
Okay.
illustration. Okay,
Okay.
it'll make more sense. So the Bowman's capsule leads to a coiled renal tubule. And again, we're not going into the specifics of the renal tubule. So this whole part over here is the renal tubule. And right, the tubule then joins the collecting duct, which passes through the medulla and into the pelvis. And in the pelvis, right, it uh, joins up with all the collecting ducts. They sort of like go into the on the ureter. So there are thousands of glomeruli, that's plural, thousands of glomeruli in each kidney. And there's another structure you need to know. We talked about the glomerulus and the Bowman's capsule. So together, the glomerulus plus the Bowman's capsule.
They both are the same thing.
No, they're not the same thing. The glomerulus is the capillaries, and the Bowman's capsule is this cup-shaped structure.
Okay.
Together, they are called a nephron. Right? In fact, not just these guys, the glomerulus, but the Bowman's capsule plus the renal tubules. Right? All of these guys together are called a nephron. Right? So this whole thing is a nephron. Okay?
Yes.
Okay, now let's talk about this function of the kidney. So I'll take you to the book, I'll show you the illustration, and then I'll just, cover this last part from the book itself. So this is right section through the kidney. So this darker part is the cortex. These lighter leaf-like structures, that's the medulla. and this white part over here is the pelvis, right? And this is, you got the ureter coming out from here, and you also have the renal artery and the renal vein attaching. If you want to take a look at the network of capillaries, right? And so these are the glomeruli, right? So those little bulbs that you're seeing are circles. I zoom in over here. So that's a nice resolution image. It's not getting blurred. And so, right, I mean, it's actually more complex. It looks more complex than that, right? So they're just mentioning, oh, these are glomeruli. This outer part is the cortex. The inner part is the medulla. And these guys coming in, this is the renal artery coming in. So, right, the renal artery supplying blood, and right, the vein coming out, so you can see it's coming sort of from the pelvis, right? And it's supplying blood up, and filtration starts from the cortex region where the nephron is, right? And it's all filtered through, and then through the medulla with the collecting duct. They haven't highlighted that part, and then into the pelvis, and then from the pelvis to the ureter, and then to the bladder. Okay. So nothing complex over there as such. You need to know how to label these parts. You need to know what these things are. Okay. The kidney's function is filtration. So the blood pressure in the glomerulus, because it's a capillary and it's coming from an artery, right? The blood pressure is high, and so it causes blood plasma to leak through the capillary walls. And so you have water and ions and glucose and urea leaving the blood vessel and going into the renal tubule. Blood cells and larger proteins are not passed through the capillary wall, so they stay in the blood. And so, right, the fluid in the renal tubule is kind of like tissue fluid, similar to tissue fluid. Now, when that happens, a lot of the water and the sugar and ions and everything, they're passed into the renal tubule, but you don't want to remove all of them, because you need the water, you need many of the ions, you need the sugar. And so the filtrate from the glomerulus collects in the Bowman's capsule and passes down the renal tubule. As it moves through the tubule, the capillaries which surround, so right, it's not just the capillary of the glomerulus, there's a network of capillary throughout, right, surrounding the renal tubule as well. And as it does this, the capillaries that surround the tubules absorb the substances which the body needs. So first the glucose is reabsorbed, then a lot of water is reabsorbed, and some of the ions are taken back, right? And so what you end up is with water and urea. Mostly, as you can see, they're showing the comparison over here, right? So water in urine, urea is high in urine, ammonia is there. You're losing some of the salts, not all of them, right? And so here they're showing, right? You've got the glomerulus over here. This is the Bowman's capsule, and these are the tubules, right? And this network of capillary around the tubule, which is involved in reabsorption. The blue and red just shows the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, right? Another illustration, and it's showing that glucose and water is reabsorbed and everything, and then whatever's left, so salts and more water absorbed further. And so the reabsorption occurs till the very end until it goes into the collecting duct. So water, urine, ions not needed by the body pass down the kidney tubule into the pelvis of the kidney. From here, the fluid, now called urine, passes down the ureter to the bladder. Right? Now the composition of urine depends on our diet. So this is kind of like a general thing. The specifics depend. Now I mentioned the bladder and the sphincter and everything, so that's written over here. And there's like, the bladder can expand and hold up to 400 centimeter cube of urine, which is about which translates to 400 ml of urine, right? So that's quite a lot. I've already mentioned the deamination of amino acids in the liver, and we're done. Any questions? Hmm? Yes, Haram, any questions?
No.
Okay, good. So we're done with that, and so you can obviously read it to reinforce all the concepts. And the next time we'll be doing chapter 14. Okay?
Yes.
All right, I'll see you next time then, inshallah. Allah Hafiz.